Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's LinkedIn Live. My name is Sarah Barnes-Humphrey. I'm the founder and host of Let's Talk Supply Chain, the host of the Blended podcast, and founder of the Blended Pledge. And today I'm so excited to be collaborating once again with the team at OneRail. Now, we have produced so much amazing content together over the last few years. We've met up at trade shows, and I was the first to film live on site in the OneRail studio last year, which was super cool. So if you have missed any of our conversations, just search OneRail over on Let's Talk Supply Chain's website or on our YouTube channel to catch up. Now, in our conversations together, we've taken on a range of subjects. We've explored everything from visibility and last mile to fleet management and inventory. But today, we're going to be talking about something a little bit different, and that's cybersecurity. New technology, AI, and automation are transforming how businesses operate, and because of that, how threats emerge. Many companies have struggled to keep pace with the changes, so we've seen some high-profile and incredibly costly cyber attacks hit the headlines. And now businesses want to fight back. So joining me today are Jeff and Julius from OneRail, and I'm excited to dive in, but first, I want to give you a bit of a taste of what we're going to be talking about today, because the industry has put a focus on security like never before. And I'm joined by two amazing industry leaders who are here to give you the inside track on how to protect against supply chain cybersecurity threats. And today we're going to be exploring what cybersecurity in 2026 actually looks like and why vendor risk is your risk. We're going to be explaining why ISO and SOC2 aren't easy, and that's the point, right? And we'll also be sharing how you can measure resilience, not just prevention, translate risk into revenue protection, and turn security certifications and compliance into competitive advantage. Now, before we dive into the conversation, remember in the comments, let us know where you are tuning in from, because we want to know, we want to give you a shout out. And of course, if you like the conversation, we love a good fire emoji around here, so put those in the comments. And if you have any questions throughout the show, put the questions in the comments as well so that we can address them as we go on. There's a QR code that's going to appear in the top right-hand corner throughout this conversation, and it's going to take you to a white paper called The Next Big Breach, and it's going to go into more depth about this conversation. So, welcome to the show, Julius and Jeff. I'm so excited that you could join me today.
Howdy, how are you? Nice to see you again.
Good. Now, I want to start off with introducing yourselves, getting an understanding of who you are, why we're here, and what we're going to be talking about. So, Julius, can you introduce yourself, talk to us about your role at OneRail, and tell us what both excites you and keeps you up at night about being a Chief Information Security Officer?
Everything.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, my name is Julius Tubbs. I am the CISO, or the Chief Information Security Officer and Data Protection Officer at OneRail. I oversee the information security and the IT business units here. I've been here for a little over 4 years. And, what excites me is that every day is a new challenge. It's nothing ever stays the same. The easy part is honestly to say what keeps me up at night, and that's honestly shadow risk, right? And it's something that I talk about a lot. And so shadow risk is one of those consequences of shadow IT. It represents like the unknown unknowns in our business, the things that we don't know in our business ecosystem. So everything that slips through the operational cracks, whether it's third-party vendors dropping the ball or an employee bypassing the rules, it creates an invisible attack surface that you can't really protect because you don't know what's there.
Right. Absolutely. Now, Jeff, talk to us about who you are, your background, talk to us about your role at OneRail, and then we're going to give a shout out to the people in the comments because we're already asking them a question and they're already delivering. So I want to let everybody know. But Jeff, let us know who you are and what you do.
Yeah, thanks. So my background, I have come from banking and fintech, subsequently telecom, and then healthcare. All of these industries are major attack vectors when it comes to cyber risk and security.
Yeah.
And it's just taken as given for those segments that there are absolutely no corners that can be cut associated with the security of your clients. So I guess I have a strong basis overall in the fundamentals of of security, and so I'm new to logistics, but really a veteran to enterprise software. One of the earliest investors actually in OneRail years and years ago, and was asked to join to help out. I'm the chief product officer and applying some of my experience to improving our practices and getting more features out the door.
Yeah, and you actually bring quite a bit of industry experience, whether it's supply chain or logistics or not, from some very mission critical industries, right? A lot of what you said, including healthcare, is life or death. And if a cybersecurity attack sort of comes into play, it can mean a lot of impact that, for a lot of different people in a lot of different ways. So glad you're part of this conversation, because I think with both of your perspectives, we're really going to understand how impactful these cybersecurity attacks really are. And I've talked about this for a number of years. It's been in the top 3 risks for supply chain, I think, since 2023. And it's not going anywhere. I mean, if it's not number 1 by now, I don't know what is. But I do want to give a shout out in the comments, because we asked everybody a question on a scale of 1 to 10. How much does your blood pressure spike when you see the word service outage in your inbox? And Drew says 10. Monique says 10. Samantha says definitely 10. So we know that it affects people in a variety of ways. And that's really what we're going to be talking about today. So over the last year or two, the conversations around cybersecurity have really ramped up. We've also seen specific events around this topic, but they've also changed, right? Julius, can you paint us a picture of where we are now when it comes to the landscape of cybersecurity? Why have data attacks or breaches changed so much?
So I think that the landscape looks the way it does because we changed before the attackers did. And that's the honest truth, right? So it's easy to blame AI and machine learning and, new technology, but the real shift is really behavioral. Yeah. So we want things faster. We want to move fast. We want to be first. We want the edge over the next business. What happens is when we want to be the one that breaks through, that push to innovation and move quickly, we kind of leave knowingly gaps open. So security used to protect relatively stable environments, but now we're securing systems that change daily, minute by minute sometimes. So the code's different, new tools, new data flows, it's all moving at business speed. So risk tolerance has gone up. And even if we don't say it out loud, attackers picked up on it first. They're using the same AI and automation to scale attacks, personalize them, and exploit the small cracks that we accept in the name of speed. So breaches didn't just change because technology did. They changed because our priorities did. The real challenge now isn't really stopping innovation. It's being honest about how much risk we're willing to accept while we're chasing it.
Yes. So I always talk about the risk dollars. Like, where are we willing to spend our risk dollars? Because with every answer or solution that we have to come up with, there's an inherent risk factor, no matter which way you go. And so what does that risk tolerance look like? And so I'm glad that you said that. And I almost wonder if they're taking advantage that we're still working in silos. And you also use the word speed. Are we expecting things to happen so quickly that maybe we're opening ourselves up to some of these breaches? Can you answer a couple of those things? Is it silos? Is it speed?
Yeah, we have seen a client, very big name actually, in the interest of haste, they wanted to go live with a solution for their distribution centers without testing and without review because of a timeline. And sometimes you have to draw the line, which is we had to tell them we're not going to do that. We will not support them launching an integration without testing. It's not responsible. You might think that this is going to help you, but this is exposing you to these risks. And we're not going to support it. We kind of put our foot down.
Yeah.
This is just somebody needs to be the parent in the room when people have pressure associated with getting things done. And in the end, there weren't any security breaches in that implementation, but there were a few bugs that they would have seen. So it requires a steady hand with the client sometimes when they ask for things or any things that would sort of compromise security. we are, we're really guardians of their own interests, and we should always advocate for not cutting any corners, because it exposes us. And do they really want that exposure?
Yeah. Well, and I think you want to work with a partner who's security first. But I think sometimes around speed, I think about the fundamentals in the fact that sometimes when we're working too quickly, we can click on that link without thinking, and then that just exposes. And I think sometimes we work in that sort of speed environment that could be to our detriment in a variety of ways. And you just gave a great example of that. Now, I know over the last few years, we've talked about the importance of diversifying supplier networks to help us with agility, risk, resilience. We've used those words kind of over and over and over again. But that has kind of opened up a danger zone that we're now struggling to close back up. Can you talk about why third-party data breaches are a rising threat for supply chain? And do you have an example that you can share that to bring that to life? Julius, I'm going to start with you, and then Jeff will go to you second.
Yeah, I think it's really what you said is rising because we are diversifying our supplier networks to gain speed and resilience, right? So we've massively expanded our attack surface without the same level of visibility and control.
Right.
I actually always go back to the Target HVAC breach because it perfectly illustrates the risk, right? No one thought that an HVAC vendor of all would be an entry point, but attackers exploited a trusted third party to move laterally in the core system. So that's the danger zone we're in right now. Our security is really only as strong as the weakest link in an increasingly complex supply chain, especially when trust is granted, but it's not continuously validated.
No, trust has got to be built, and it's built over time, and it's built, through decisions. It's built through situations like this, hopefully that don't come up, but understanding and knowing that your partner is thinking security first. Jeff, what do you think about this question?
So you kind of talk about third parties and risk. There's risk all over the place. What you can mitigate really has to do with, how you integrate with them and to make sure that you use the highest security standards possible. In logistics in particular, we don't, OneRail is not particularly exposed to any one particular logistics partner having an outage or something like that. They may or may not have risks. They don't see all of our customer data, for example. But I can give you an example from the logistics space, like Siva Logistics, which I believe they're in the UK and France. The end of last year, their entire database, like everything, their entire customer list, all of the shipments, all of the manifests, all of the products, all of their pricing was compromised. It was stolen and held for ransom. And they said if they didn't pay the ransom, it was going to be sold online on the dark web. So the magnitude of that, could you imagine, that's a $20 billion company, what the fallout was from that?
Yeah.
They're a private company, so we can't see what it actually did to their stock price, but I can tell you that it's absolutely massive impact on their enterprise value. What do their customers think of that?
Yeah.
So,
and how do you bounce back from that from a trust perspective in the fact that, you really have to do a lot to be able to prove going forward that this isn't going to happen again. And I don't know if there's a way to be able to do that, to be honest. And so it's going to take some time. So if you think about reputational risk around what something like this could cause and how many years it's going to take you to get that reputation back, to gain back that credibility and that trust, it does take some time. So we've talked about the threats that can come from outside. And I sort of alluded to this earlier around insider incidents, right? Where we're moving too quickly and we click on a link too fast. I think that can also be a bit of a costly blind spot. What do insider incidents look like? And what are the impacts of that? Julius, I'm going to start with you. And then Jeff, will talk to you about the business impact of that.
Yeah, so insider incidents. So it's a scary phrase there, but they don't always look like we think they look like, right? So not like the bad actor in a hoodie. They're really often accidental, right? It can be a disgruntled employee that's abusing access, or a well-intentioned developer that's trying to move fast and get stuff done, and they end up pasting an API key into the wrong place for support,
Eesh.
right? And not realizing that exposure. So the impact can be massive. One that results in, a loss of confidentiality, as we know it as a data breach or access leak. So the biggest thing, though, is it creates downstream effects that ripple into our customer environments. And again, as you alluded to earlier, that does impact customer trust and our reputational trust, as well as operations. And, again, it's often far beyond what anyone intended. But these two types of things happen on a daily basis. I would say one more than the other, because again, we're all trying to just move fast and get things done. But it's through us trying to get things done relatively fast where there's a lack of visibility sometimes, and that's where that risk is introduced.
Yeah,
Well,
the insider compromise is, more and more they start to take the shape of phishing attacks or impersonation attacks, where somebody thought that they were clicking through to a valid email associated with a known vendor or portal or something like this. And the repercussions there, those are what are most effective. I'll use other industries I've been in healthcare, for example. Like, there's many examples of entire hospital systems being lax on training associated with phishing attacks, or filters associated with looking at heuristic or black or gray listed sites, and they pass along these emails, and it creates a completely massive system-wide health system outage, where all their records, all their EMR and practice management stuff is held for ransom. They incur financial loss from not being able to handle patients, lawsuits from patients and other healthcare entities that work with them.
Right.
And then they even pay the ransom most of the time because the stuff isn't encrypted. It's like, if you really look at our healthcare system, and that's, probably the strongest attack vector out there, it's pretty frightening. So, they, even after they paid the ransom, they still might have lost the identity and the PHI information contained within the data that they paid the ransom for anyway. It's just terrible. It's terrible impacts. I mean, it almost really needs government, legislative standards associated with some of these things that aren't really adhered to now. Like, HIPAA's a self-attestation type scenario. It's not really validated. And in the end, it's loss of confidence, and it makes a messy healthcare system even worse.
Well, and the same goes for, logistics, supply chain. We're delivering, life and death, mission critical every day, all day, in a variety of different ways. I mean, I think about being in logistics, doing aircraft on ground, where the pressure of having to deliver a part to an aircraft so that people can get on their way, is really very, very real. And so I almost think, I'm glad that we're talking about speed, because I almost think that as, the organization, as the leaders of the organization, thinking about how we're moving through our days and the pressure that we're putting on the teams and parts of the organization to do things on a very quickly. And Jeff, you pointed that out with a customer saying, I need to go live now. And you're like, no, we need to make sure that security is first. And so we have to have these conversations so that it's top of mind all the time. And you gave a really great example from healthcare. One of the things that we don't think about are the lawsuits. What happens after, right? So not only is it reputational risk, it's, you may have paid for the ransom, but then you also may have some lawsuits that linger from that as well. And so the ramifications.
I mean, the dollars invested in being proactive on cyber risk and security, it's really an investment. What are you mitigating? What losses are you mitigating?
Yeah. Well, and one of the things that you also mentioned from the healthcare example is the downtime. And I think that's probably one of the bigger impacts business-wide, is the outages and the downtime that an organization can face as a whole, because that's a whole other beast, especially if we think about the retail industry. Jeff, what do you think about that? And then we'll go to Julius.
Downtime. So we're very sensitive to downtime and high transactional availability, and we're very fortunate overall in that space to be properly architected. But there are examples recently of major cloud outages that are globally impacting. And here's a paradoxical one. Cloudflare, which is an internet security company, caused one of the largest ones.
Right.
Like they had some bad patch or something like this. Their service disruption took down a third of the internet for half an hour.
And everybody was freaking out, Jeff.
Yeah. And I mean, that cost Shopify vendors estimated like $15 to $30 million just for that half
in
hour.
30 minutes?
Yes. And Shopify is really big too. Look at it this way. So those dollars are just gone. People are abandoning shopping carts if the site doesn't work. If you can't accept payments or do transactions for a window of time, a material percentage of them are just gone. You're going to go to a site, you're not going to buy that thing, or you're going to buy it from Amazon instead because that's working and this one isn't, for example. It's it's really service outages besides downtime, besides reputational problems, just directly equals lost revenue.
Well, I think
not only that, I mean, some companies like we even stand by our high availability, and there's systematic SLA performance numbers in there where there's rebates or reduction in fees associated with any outages.
Well, I also think like a security first mindset is also a bit of a competitive advantage as well, because if you don't have downtime or outages, you're better off than your competition, right? Julius, what do you think about this one?
Yeah, I agree with Jeff. Listen, downtime isn't abstract. It's immediate, right? So a breach or an incident that turns into a system outage stops transactions, disrupts fulfillment. Customer trust it's down the drain, and it's real time, right? The longer the downtime lasts, the more visibility and costly the impact is, right? And one of the things that I'm often asked about is, do I care really about downtime and all that kind of stuff? And I explain to people, one of the core tenets of security is called availability. We have a security triad. It's called CIA: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. And what folks may not realize is when a system goes down, that's still a security issue because now you've suffered a loss of availability, right? And so if we think recently, while it may not have been a security incident, and I don't know, Verizon recently just shut down for almost 12 to 14 hours across the nation.
And that inadequately explained it yet.
Yeah, that impacted delivery drivers, that impacted emergency personnel, that impacted everyone. That was costly. So no one knows what the cause of that was, but at the end of the day, it was a loss of availability that many people suffered from, and that impacted revenue across multiple industries.
Yeah. Well, and you talk about Verizon. I mean, that even touched supply chain. If anybody was on that particular network, then they were having and seeing some gaps and having some challenges within their supply chain to be able to communicate. Whether that was internet, whether that was cell phones, whatever that looked like, it had an impact across a variety of different industries, and supply chain is just no different. So, sometimes we think about or we hear about Verizon, and this is happening to Verizon, and we're like, well, that's not going to happen to us in supply chain. Well, think again, because it absolutely can. We've got a great conversation happening in the comments. I love to see it. Thank you so much for everybody who's watching and listening, who's putting in a comment. Remember to give us a fire emoji. If you have any questions, we're going to get to those. Put those in the comments now so we can see them and put them in as part of the conversation. So let's talk about why enterprise shippers should care about how deeply a technology provider embeds compliance into its culture. We started off by saying that you want to make sure that you're partnering with a technology provider that thinks about security first. Why is that so important, Jeff?
So often we're handling the consumer demographics information associated with whomever the end consumer is that's receiving a product. or like the SIVA scenario, it constitutes their entire client base as well. So you need to protect your client as well as all their end consumers. This is accomplished, not just through encryption standards and certain different keys and stuff like that, but also by sharing or revealing the minimal amount of information necessary to complete a transaction, aka a delivery. It really, we must be guardians for the security of the data for our clients. And like I mentioned before, sometimes we have to remind them that that what they may be suggesting or the timelines that they're going after would create potential compromises that we don't think are acceptable. So
yeah, absolutely. And I want to bring Julius in on this because earlier in the conversation, you said we're only as strong as our weakest link. So this applies here, right? And how far back do we have to go? And maybe we'll get into this in the conversation, but I'm so curious as to what questions we need to be asking the providers to make sure that they're on board and their security first and all that kind of stuff. Julius, what do you think?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is, if you really want to understand how deeply compliance is embedded into a provider or a vendor, you really need to take a look at how seriously they take security. And I don't mean just by a piece of paper. I mean, how seriously do they take it in their day-to-day operations? That's the biggest thing, right? So when compliance is a part of your culture, not meaning, hey, this is just a checkbox, we need to get this audit or we need to do this because the customer says it. No, we want to do it because that's who we are. That's who we want to be as a company. We want to show that trust. Those are our core values. It shows you how decisions are made under pressure, how issues are handled when no one's watching, and whether security is actually truly prioritized when it matters most. Or again, is it just a checkbox? Are we just doing this because we have to do it because it's a regulatory act or it's in a customer contract? Or again, are we doing this because this is who we are and this is who we want to be? We truly want to be that trusted partner. I can tell you at OneRail, that's one of our core values, is being that trusted partner.
Yeah. Well, I think you also have to understand your boundaries, because that really helps in understanding who you want to align with. What are your values? How does it align with those values? Right? Are we thinking about security in the same way? What does success look like when it comes to security and keeping everybody within that ecosystem secure? What do we have to do and what's our responsibility? And what does the suppliers or the vendors have to do and think about as part of that priority list and how we think about it? Timothy, I see your question. We're going to get to that in just a little bit. I want friendly reminder, the QR code or the link in the comments, go and get that white paper, The Next Big Breach. It's actually going to go into a lot more detail than what we're talking about today. So highly recommend you go and get that. Now, we've talked about some of the challenges, and I think a big part of tackling them is security certification. So we're going to get into this because I think some organizations are probably like, do I need this? Do I really need this? So what is an SOC2 report? What does it look like? What does it look at within a business? And what are the assessment criteria? Julius?
Yeah, so to give a rundown, Service Organizational Control, or a SOC 2 report, is essentially an independent assessment, honestly, of how well a company protects data and operates in a secure, reliable way, right? So it's issued by a third-party firm, and they base their standards defined by the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, right? So at a high level, SOC 2 looks at how businesses are designed and how it actually operates, not just if policies exist on paper. So it evaluates controls across 5 trust service criteria. So TSC, right? So the first is security. That's mandatory. Everybody gets security, right? Then you have the option of choosing availability, confidentiality, processing integrity, and privacy. But you pick them based off of what's relevant to your business, right? So most companies only get security and maybe privacy. I can tell you at OneRail, we've kind of shot for the moon. We choose all 5 trust service criteria, so it makes it a fun time during audit season.
Right.
So what it looks like is there's a ton of different controls. There's monitoring, incident response, change management, vendor risk. Basically, there's a ton of different controls that look at how your data is protected throughout its life cycle. And so there's not even technical controls, right? There's a lot of governance, risk management, and operational discipline. So there are actually two types, right? Type 1 report shows how controls are designed at a point in time, right? So when you see a customer or a vendor and they have a SOC 2 type 1, that's good. That's not anything bad. That's good, but it's showing a point in time. However, a SOC 2 type 2 goes a little bit further. It proves that those controls actually work consistently over a period of time. We're talking 6 to 12 months. So when customers ask for a SOC 2, what they're really saying is, can I trust you with my data? And can you prove it? And can it be proven consistently over a period of time? So it's not just, do you have a SOC 2? What type do you have? And what are the trust service criteria? Do you have any that are relevant to protecting the data that I have?
Well, and I think OneRail recently achieved, what is it ISO 27001? I don't. And so
ISO
2022 certification. What does that actually mean for you and your customers? And then I want to go back to the SOC 2 type 2, because you've kept that into compliance for 5 consecutive years, which is a big, undertaking, because none of this is easy to do, right? So talk us through kind of what that looks like.
None of this is easy, right? As far as ISO, ISO was a big deal for us, right? Because it doesn't just mean traditional cybersecurity. It means holistically security, risk management, and continuous improvement are truly built into how we operate, right? So they're not bolted on for compliance. For our customers, ISO provides independent assurance that we manage their data responsibly, but proactively to identify and reduce risk. It has an information security management system that has a ton of different controls, again, in that framework. And you hold yourselves to a globally recognized standard. So most companies get a SOC 2 that are continental or in the continental United States, but ISO is worldwide. That is a global standard. So when you hold yourself to that standard along with SOC 2, you're really putting in some type of work. So it's not easy to obtain, and is actually much harder to maintain, because you need to be able to demonstrate it over a period of time.
Right. And you've been able to do that for 5 consecutive years. What are some of the biggest lessons you've learned from having that? And I think it would be a good idea when you're looking to work with a vendor for you to ask for some of this, right? To understand where they're at with ISO or what kind of SOC 2 compliance they have.
Yeah. So Jeff mentioned this earlier, talking about security investments, right? I think the biggest lesson that I've learned across my career and just seeing this in the industry is that security and compliance, they're not one-time investments. They're reoccurring reinventions, right? I often say to people, and I know my team hears this all the time, if you think compliance is expensive, try non-compliance. Because that is where the real cost shows up in breaches, the lost trust, the reactive firefighting. What SOC 2 and ISO force you to do is build ongoing discipline. And once that discipline is in place, it actually makes the business run smoother, not slower. But it takes time. And again, it truly takes discipline. But the biggest thing that it probably takes is the willingness to invest in security and privacy and take it seriously.
I think that's the best line out of this all, like, what is the cost of non-compliance? Not necessarily the cost of compliance, but what's the cost? What is it going to cost you as an organization? We talk about taking costs out of everything. But if we think about future-proofing the business so that you don't have to have a compliance cost at the end of the day, whether that's reputational risk or what have you, I mean, it's a really big deal. And that brings the proactive thinking rather than the reactive thinking, because once it happens, and it's hard to come back from. So I think, people, you talked about this earlier, Julius, about it being a box ticking exercise. And I think if people are thinking about certifications like this, if they're thinking about compliance, if they're thinking about security as being a box ticking exercise, that's a really, really big mistake. So Julius, how can businesses turn these security certifications into business resilience? What does that look like?
It's a good question. And,
So I'll
it's
go
hard
first
because
on that if you want. There's a lot of different types of like resilience overall. In practice, you're going to be confronted with enterprise customers that require these certifications and your demonstration that you have them. So it's an opportunity cost. You will not get the enterprise scale client without demonstrating that you've achieved SOC 2 Type 2 and maintained. So resilience, you're not even going to have business to remain resilient. You're not even going to be able to secure the top level business opportunities.
Right. Yeah.
The reason why I think it's twofold and a little bit difficult, because it really depends on where a business is, right? When you have a startup or a new business, they're just trying to get started and get these attestations. But the way you really turn that resilience on is stopping the mindset that you're just trying to pass an audit. And that's where I think a lot of companies falter, especially when starting out, is, hey, we want to land and expand. But in order to gain these enterprise customers, we need to be able to pass this audit. That is the wrong mindset, right? So I think that when you're looking to be resilient, you have to operationalize SOC 2 and ISO, and you use them as a guide on how you design systems, how you manage risk, how you respond to incidents. They have to be a part of your day-to-day decisions. You end up with fewer surprises that way, faster recovery when things go wrong, and you end up being a business that can absorb change instead of breaking under it. And typically that's what we see a lot of businesses, because they're looking to just pass an audit, just check that box. They're not as resilient. So when change does happen, they break.
Yeah. And nobody likes surprises. As much disruption as we have in supply chain, nobody likes a good surprise. So I go back to my earlier statement around what are the right questions we should be asking vendors. I almost feel like, what are the right questions we should be asking ourselves so that we know what our tolerance is, our risk tolerance, where we want to be security and compliance wise, but also what are the questions we should be asking our vendors? Julius?
Yeah, so there are a ton of questions that we can ask, and everyone has RFPs and security questionnaires, and I think that as a business, the way that we grow is shift from the traditional questions of, hey, are you compliant with this, and are you compliant with that? We shift to, how do you actually operate in this area, right? So businesses really should be asking vendors how they secure access, how they monitor for issues, how you handle incidents, how is risk reassessed as a relationship evolves. Because again, most of the data breaches do not come from bad intentions. They come from weak governance and assumptions that no one revisited. That's really where it stems from. So again, I can ask you, are you compliant with monitoring? That is a great question to ask, but the better question is, how do you monitor? Because, as someone looking from the outside, if I'm assessing a third party, I'm glad that you have monitoring in place. That's really good. However, I want to know how you do it, because that's going to tell me everything that I need to know about your approach to security and compliance.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I also wonder, how do you capture, like, I don't want to say a breach because it hasn't necessarily happened yet, but like attacks happen all the time. And so how are you monitoring it? What are you doing when it comes up? What are the protocols in place? Like, do we have to get that in depth with our questions with the vendor?
We do to some degree, right? But I think this is where you have those ISOs and those SOC 2s in place, right? Because those, depending on the scope and the trust service criteria, they are going to evaluate whether you already have those things in place. And so,
Right.
Any business can get breached that has ISO or SOC 2. None of us are immune, right? We often go by the term assume breach, right? That's what I live by every day. It's not if, it's when it happens, what are we going to do, right? So you have to look at businesses and meet them where they are and ask those tough questions. Hey, do you have a SOC 2? What trust service criteria do you have? That's going to let me know, hey, do they have a business continuity and disaster recovery plan in place? Do they have this policy? Well, you're probably not going to get that SOC 2 or that ISO certification if you don't have those things in place. So just from the default, just having those attestations, they tell me a lot. But we have to do a better job at still asking those difficult questions. Hey, I know you have this thing, you have those things, and they tell me, a little bit about your business, but I want to go a little bit deeper, because you have to make sure that people care about your security as much as you do.
Yeah.
So I think
we actually had to shut a vendor off, actually, Julius and I, one time years ago, started to use a web development tool. And we asked a series of detailed questions related to how do you ensure that our data is isolated from other customers? Tell us about your password standards, expiration reset standards. Tell us about your security protocols and your SLA recovery plan and your incident notification and stuff like that. And all the answers were a little iffy. And immediately we said, we're grown up now. We can't be working with these tools that, you could just make an application because it's easy. We're going to work with this, and it doesn't give us any comfort to see other big companies or your clients. You don't have answers that we consider sufficient related to industry standards to secure our data and our clients. So you're out. You're out. Effective immediately. We're not using your tools whatsoever. And we enforce them now ourselves to the highest standard possible for the vendors we use.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about this sort of being continuous improvement. It's something that you've got to keep on top of all the time. I wonder how we measure this. How do we measure this? How do we have KPIs? How do we have metrics? What does that look like? Who needs those KPIs? Talk to me about measuring success in this realm. Jeff, I'm going to start with you.
Besides the obvious SLA associated with your services and things that are created associated with breaches, there are protocols associated with detection of any breach or suspected breach, or if anybody accesses a system, and then assessment whether or not they actually were able to obtain any data, if it's sensitive or not, and then a protocol associated with notification of client or clients affected, and then what's been done to triage it, and then finally what's been done to remedy it. So there are sort of lead times on notification for these types of things. Fortunately, we haven't had these types of incidents, thanks to Julius and team. But there are measurements associated with SLA and response times. And then there's something known as a pen test, which is a penetration attempt. You basically hire a third-party firm to attempt to attack your services from a digital perspective. And they're looking for vulnerabilities, port numbers that are on and different technical aspects associated with things. Are your servers set to respond and stuff like that? So there are scores associated with penetration test results, which I would consider metrics as well.
Yeah. And I think it would also be a good idea. Like it'll show you the gaps of where you need to work on. And that could be internal. It could be external. But I think when it comes to the SLAs, you got to understand, again, I go back to what is my responsibility? What's the vendor's responsibility? Where are we holding them at? Whether you're asking them the questions or not, if you've got an SLA in place, the vendor needs to understand their roles, responsibilities, and expectations as well. Julius, do you have anything to add in here from the IT side?
Yeah, because I'm over security and IT, often my security hat usually trumps it. But when I put back on my IT hat, and look at it from an infrastructure perspective, resilient metrics have to go beyond prevention and security controls to reflect how the business actually feels about, an outage, right? So that means measuring things like system recovery time and service availability, the impact the customer transactions, support volume spikes. And you just talked about it, SLA exposure, because those are the things that signals operations, customer teams, and leadership. They care about those things. The reality is going to be starkly different. Audiences need different KPIs. IT needs technical recovery and stability metrics. Business leaders, they need operational and financial impact. And, our customer facing teams need visibility into the experience and trust. So everyone, has to kind of be aligned on what resilient actually means to them in a company. And I think that because a lot of companies operate in silos, not everyone really understands what resilient resiliency or being resilient means from an organizational perspective. I think that they understand what it means from a departmental perspective, but I think that you have to align as an organization. What do we define as resilient?
Yeah. Yeah. What does success look like? What do we define as resilient? What do we want to expect not only from our internal stakeholders, but also our external stakeholders as well? Because if we're going to hold our external stakeholders to a certain level, we also need to hold ourselves and our internal teams to that level as well. So before we get to the audience questions, which I see a couple of have popped up in there, if you've got a question, now's the time to put it in the comments. I think the biggest question for both of you, or maybe Jeff, businesses are certified, right? We've talked about that. They're asking the right questions of their vendors. We've talked about that. They're measuring the KPIs. We've talked about these KPIs. How does that set them apart? Like, how can data security and compliance become a true competitive advantage?
If you're a business and you're assessing different solution providers in your vertical, in this case, logistics, and you've seen recent examples of the consequences of breaches and material outages associated with security, shouldn't this be a criterion by which you heavily weight your selection? Is it actually one that's a prerequisite that if you fail to demonstrate that you have made your best efforts associated with data security and cyber risk, shouldn't you be eliminated?
Yeah, you might not.
Why would you be eligible for my business?
Yeah, you might not even be given a seat at the table.
Yeah, so you set yourself apart by leaving no stone unturned, making sure you continuously make it a practice of your organization, as Julius has said, and being able to demonstrate it. And then the business and the enterprise trust and performance flow naturally from that.
Mm-hmm.
It's the groundwork. It's really the groundwork that's needed to win the largest enterprise business, to build a strong, stable platform. It's a prerequisite if you're ever going to win, government contracts as well. We've worked with the Air Force and the military bases and stuff like that. We're not getting past the gate, literally and metaphorically, without going over and above on security.
Yeah.
So it is competitive advantage by the fact that you demonstrate that you leave absolutely no window, and nothing left to chance associated with security standards.
Yeah, it shows that you want a seat at the table, right? It shows that that's something that is important to you and that you want a seat at the table. All right, let's get to some audience questions. So Timothy says, what can businesses do to prepare or mitigate against loss of availability? Julius, do you want to take this one?
Yeah, I think that, of course, we can always look to our policies. I think the best thing that you can do is start with policies and ensuring you have policies in place, like a incident response policy, as well as your disaster recovery plans. But I think one of the biggest things that can happen is, I would say, tabletops. A lot of companies don't really do tabletops like they should. And so what a tabletop is, it's essentially just going through a scenario. What should happen if this scenario occurs? What happens if Azure goes down? What do we do? Or what happens if Verizon goes down? What happens if there is a data breach? What happens then, right? So I think when businesses take their policies serious, take their plan serious, but again, those are just documents. You have to put it in, in practice, right? So taking action on it. And so once you take that action on it, truly evaluate where you are and have some tough conversations. I know we conduct tabletops all the time, and you don't always get the answers that you want. You may find out upon doing the tabletop, hey, this person did not know what they were doing, or we didn't have an answer for something, right? That is important, because when it happens in real time, your customers are going to be relying on you knowing what to do when you need to do it. So I think that's one of the first steps that someone can take to truly ensure that their company is ready for any incident, any disaster that could happen.
Well, and you used the word earlier, discipline, right? If we think about in our personal lives, a habit takes 30 days to like disentangle and sort of get over and create a new habit. And I think it's really about having discipline within your organizations to be able to do this. And there's a lot of great companies out there that actually gamify some of this for the teams. I know I've used it for my team, where I just wanted to create the foundation of these are the things that you need to think about. You know, you might be a freelancer working with us, but you're still connected to our network. You're still going over customer details, and you could be on a public Wi-Fi. Are you thinking about what that actually means if you're in our system on a public Wi-Fi? And are you using a VPN or something to keep us safe and secure, because we're essentially your clients? So there's these discussions and these gamification type things that you can do to sort of set the foundation and set the mindset in motion of things that you need to think about. Because it could be just as basic as, you know, getting into the system from a public Wi-Fi. So there's a question here from Suleika. What does it take to get ISO? Julius.
So what it takes to get ISO, it takes a lot of gray hair. That's what it really takes.
You look great, Julius. You look great.
Yeah, I got all the gray hairs. He kept his.
Jeff's got the gray hair, so you passed it on to him.
So what it really takes is exactly what you talked about. It takes discipline. It takes a lot of discipline, in fact, but it takes executive buy-in more than anything. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, when you're building an information security management system, which is what ISO is built off of, 27001, it isn't just isolated to IT or security. This is throughout our entire organization and our way that we approach security, risk, privacy, and compliance throughout the whole thing, right? So that means I can't operate in a silo. I have to include product. I have to include engineering, operations, HR, sales, marketing. Everybody has to be included because they all have a part to play in it, right? I tell people every day, because my team is internal facing, our customers are internal users, right? And then their customers are external customers, right? There's so much that we do. When we get audited, we're not being audited on our external customers. We're being audited on our internal customers and what they do every day. So from the moment they click on something, from the moment they look at security awareness and training, to them reporting something or uninstalling unapproved software, every data point, everything that happens, that's what we're audited on. And so we have to demonstrate a level of discipline consecutively every day, every moment of the day, to be able to go to an independent firm and say, hey, we want to be evaluated against something like ISO. They're going to come in and do a readiness assessment. They're going to come in and do an audit. Once they do their preliminary audit, they're going to let you know very quickly where you are and where you aren't. After that stage one, you're going to have an opportunity to try to fix everything. And once you can fix it, you're going to have a stage two. If you can get out of that stage two with no non-conformities, then you can show that, hey, you're a trusted partner. I'm not saying that it's easy, but I will say that not only does it take discipline, it takes passion. So you have to have the people in the right places who actually enjoy the work that they do and actually care about your customers, whether they're internal and external. You have to have people that care about your customers and the success of the organization. That's what it takes to get ISO, to truly care about your customers.
Well, I think good communicators too. I think part and parcel of this is not only having your team on board and passionate about it, but also getting the rest of the organization on board about how important this is and what they're doing on a daily basis and the impact that it makes as well. So that was such a great answer. I appreciate that. So we're going to take one more audience question. Gadiel says, how is total cost evaluated in an event where there is loss of availability or data breach? Jeff, do you want to take this one?
Sure. So I don't think I've actually seen any service agreement MSA or schedule or anything like that, which specifies the potential cost impact of a data breach, that probably would come through in discovery associated with what the data is, how much of it, the nature of it, and what happened to it. So that one's a little fuzzy. It's kind of situational. When it comes to loss of availability, most enterprise agreements now do have essentially prorations / discounts, reduction in the amount that is charged for a SaaS service based on being, available less than 99.5% of the time. And it's sort of a table that prorates the amount that you can charge that client for a month. And there are exceptions. So there's exceptions related to force majeure, and really that entails any unanticipated cloud outage where it is not our software or solution, it is that particular cloud vendor that is down. The thing that's concerning to me that I see associated with the cloud is we're seeing these major outages when it comes to different cloud vendors. You got to make sure that your contract excludes you from being liable for some DNS error when it comes to my Amazon or something like this, and that you're not responsible for that. Tying it into a question that somebody had before, which is how do you plan for maximum availability? My advice is to make sure you build in geo redundancy and or a hybrid cloud strategy from the beginning, because they will go down. It's not really the way that architecture that the internet was supposed to be from the beginning. There are these very concentrated data centers that these major providers have in certain geographies, Northern Virginia, Texas, for example. And when Northern Virginia gets hit from a fiber optic break or some screw up on one of the cloud providers, there's major outages. And believe me, your clients don't really care that it was Amazon's fault and not yours.
No, they just want it to be fixed.
Right. They want those transactions to be cha-chinging along the way no matter what.
Yeah.
So take it upon yourself to find geo redundancy and or a hybrid cloud scenario to mitigate that. And you'll see the larger clients put a schedule together related to prorations in fees associated with any service outages.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I think one of the things that helps, and businesses do this, I know OneRail does, is, oftentimes we conduct a business impact assessment. And, what that does is allow us to quantify the impact of certain assets, right? So if you think about it like this, oftentimes we're going in and we're saying, what are the most critical assets to our business? And we're documenting them, and we're documenting the associated cost. So we may have to get with product, we may have to get with finance. It could be something so simple as, hey, what happens should we have ransomware that someone clicks on and it knocks out 30 developer computers, and each of these developer computers cost $2,500 with the associated things. We're thinking about that financial impact and that cost, and everything's associated again with that data breach or that loss of availability, right? There's so much downtime. We're thinking about, are certain employees hourly? What's the hourly cost? If we have other service providers that we have to pay for, but we're paying for those service providers and we can't even leverage them because another system is down. So now we're paying for stuff that we can't even use. That's lost revenue, that's lost money. So those are the things that often we think about when we think about what is the total cost of a data breach or a loss of availability. There's so many different downstream effects, but what a business can do is take the time to understand, what are your critical assets? What are your dependencies? If they go down, what are the associated costs with that? Because when you do that, you're going to find a number, and then you're going to be able to quantify, and work with finance what the total cost looks like and put that dollar into it.
Such great questions, such great advice. We are running out of time. Suleika, I see your question. We are going to tag Julius and Jeff in your question, and they will answer it offline, because I have one more question, and I need you to be very brief on this, gentlemen, because we've got about 30 seconds left. I want to wrap up with, what should our listeners take away from this discussion? What should they be doing or thinking about next? Jeff, I'm going to start with you, and Julius will end with you.
Don't consider cyber risk and security some necessary task that you just need to get through and yes your way through. Consider it an asset which enables you to win the most important enterprise business.
Awesome. Julius, last word.
Yeah, very simple. Trust. Businesses should be deliberately building and maintaining digital trust. That is the currency of the modern business. Trust.
Wow, such a great word, such a powerful word. With per breach costs in the US soaring to more than $10 million, it really is critical to close those security gaps. And yes, certain things like achieving data security certifications aren't easy, but it's been so valuable to hear that there are questions to ask and best practices to put into place that really can save massive costs down the line. And we aren't powerless to cyber threats. We just need to refocus and have some discipline. So if you're looking for a partner who takes business security seriously and has the track record and processes to back it up, check them out, OneRail.com. And remember, the QR code, plus we have a link in the comments to that white paper about your next breach that elaborates on a lot more than we were able to talk about today in this discussion. Go and check that out. Click the link, grab the white paper. I want to give a big thank you to everybody who watched and listened today. And obviously a big thank you to Julius and Jeff for joining me today on the show and sharing such great insights. Thank you both so much.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Happy to be here.